In the beginning, there were stars, and trees, and a fish, and God gave us Cyberpunk, and we were all so excited. Then we played it, and we asked God for our money back. In this video, we're going to take a look at the history of Cyberpunk 2077, and then we're going to look at how the game is now. Is it worth revisiting? Is it worth going back to? And is it finally the game we were all promised? Cyberpunk was easily one of the most anticipated games of all time. It actually sold 8 million pre-orders. 8 million pre-orders. Who does that? That's fucking insanity. To put that in perspective, no Resident Evil title in the entire franchise has ever hit 8 million sales. As a matter of fact, a lot of games never hit 8 million sales. To have 8 million pre-orders is truly insane. So clearly the marketing department at CDPR did their part, right? Well, not really, because I think the hype was a big part of what led to this game's initial downfall. You see, one of the biggest mistakes CDPR originally made was they decided to announce this game in 2012 with this trailer. While this trailer looks really cool and promises a few low-key things like corrupt cops and cool cybernetic implants, the game was still 8 years away from coming out. Now, at the time, CDPR thought they would have The Witcher 3 ready by 2014 or early 2015, and then they would focus on Cyberpunk and get it out by 2017, because there were two separate teams at CDPR both working on the game simultaneously. The majority of the team at the time was working hard on The Witcher 3, while a smaller team were working on Cyberpunk. The goal was to finish The Witcher 3 and then move everyone over to Cyberpunk. Unfortunately, that really did not happen. We'll get into more of that in a minute. The next big problem for Cyberpunk was The Witcher 3. At E3 2003, at Microsoft's E3 showcase, CDPR would take the stage and announce a game that would become one of the greatest games of all time by almost every metric with this presentation.
Witcher 3 Wild Hunt will be coming to Xbox One, and it'll be true to form, with deep tactical combat completely rebuilt from the ground up, state-of-the-art next-gen DX11 graphics, a dark, mature, and epic, non-linear story, the trademark of our studio. And for the first time in the history of the series, the game will be completely free-roaming and set in an open-world environment. And it's vast, easily with over 100 hours of gameplay.
You see, a lot of video game hype and your initial sale numbers have a lot to do with the game that came out before it. What we're learning with the FromSoft games and CDPR is they don't have to be direct sequels. If we like the studio who's working on the game, we're more likely to consider buying the next game from that studio, even if it's not even in the same franchise. And The Witcher 3 is one of the greatest games of all time by nearly every single metric. This game was beloved. To date, it has sold 40 million copies. A level of success I didn't even think was possible for a deep action role-playing game. The Witcher 3 has outsold nearly every Call of Duty game, which is pure insanity. The way The Witcher 3 set Cyberpunk up for failure is if you're trying to build hype for something, whether that be a video game, a YouTube video, a football game, any sporting event, you're kind of fighting uphill. And depending on what you're trying to make, you may also have people trying to pull you back down that hill. So the trick to building good hype is getting started very quickly, so you have a lot of momentum when you go up the hill as you try to crest and get to the top. But The Witcher changed the metric. The Witcher completely changed what CDPR was doing. They were no longer fighting uphill. Their hype train was on the top of Mount Everest, and they were pushing it downhill. Instead of realizing that and slowing down on the gas just a little bit, the train was leaving the station and CDPR had taken the brakes off. and we were all so goddamn excited. Okay guys, we're all gonna be sick when Cyberpunk comes out, when it's ready. A hilarious date, which was designed to protect CDPR from a ton of fan backlash so they could focus on finishing the game. But the problem is, when you first announce your game in 2012, people will start comparing you to Duke Nukem Forever if it's 10 years later, not understanding that full development hadn't started. The other massive kick to the head The Witcher gave to Cyberpunk is manpower. CDPR had to continue to pull people from the Cyberpunk team to help finish off The Witcher. And this meant you had far less people working on Cyberpunk, as well as The Witcher, building the hype for Cyberpunk. Well, it was too late to do anything because the train had already left the station. So we fast forward to E3 2018, where Cyberpunk would appear with this trailer.
In 2077, they voted my city the worst place to live in America. Main issues: sky-high rate of violence, and more people living below the poverty line than anywhere else. Can't deny it, it's all true. But everybody still wants to live here. This city's always got a promise for you. Might be a lie, an illusion, but it's there, just around the corner, and it keeps you going.
There was also a 48-minute gameplay, which was originally shown off to the press exclusively, but of course leaked online. But a few days later, CDPR would release it for everyone. And that hype train that had no brakes and we were all having a big old party on was now at nuclear speeds. It was flying downhill so fast that even if Cyberpunk 2077 lived up to The Witcher, it probably still wouldn't have been good enough. People were declaring Cyberpunk 2077 the greatest game of all time before it ever even came out. In a lot of ways, I feel that Cyberpunk 2077 was doomed to fail because of this massive hype. CDPR would try to limit the hype a little bit the next year, as they would come with this short trailer.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Shut up and take my money!
And they would do some interviews continuing to promise that Cyberpunk would be a substitute for real life. Come on guys, let's go to Night City right now. We were all freaking insane at this point. We just wanted CDPR to give us the game. And it was going to come out in 2019. Well, it didn't. The game was delayed until October 2020. And we said, okay, but this better be the best game ever. And by this point, game audiences had largely evolved from the controversy surrounding No Man's Sky's delay. And a lot of people were like, well, that's okay, just as long as this game is ready when it launches. Release it when it's ready and take as much time as you need to polish it. We all expected a polished experience, but we didn't realize just how bad of a state Cyberpunk was in 2019. You see, because of The Witcher 3's DLCs, full development on Cyberpunk 2077 didn't actually start until 2016. So 2019 would have been only 2 years to build a game that was bigger and far more ambitious than Skyrim. And Skyrim took Bethesda 5 years, and Bethesda has been building games like Skyrim in their entire history. So it's going to take another studio who's trying to move into that space longer than it would take Bethesda. So 2 years was truly insanity. In reality, the game probably should have come out in 2022. And it probably would have been received much better if it had. It would have given them infinity more time to polish it. The problem was, for CDPR, the stockholders, who only care about short-term success because they can always sell their stock, demanded the game comes out sooner because they wanted to get a return on their investment. So CDPR seemed to be realizing they were riding on a train with no brakes, and they tried to slow it down a little bit. However, in 2020, at Microsoft's E3 press briefing, they would move the train speed to light speed when they announced that this game's companion character would be the breathtaking Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves would actually come out on Microsoft's E3 stage. Here it is.
You play as an outlaw, an enhanced mercenary working in the sleazy underbelly of the city. Yeah. Okay, but let me tell you, the feeling of being there, of walking the streets of the future, is really going to be breathtaking. You're breathtaking. You're all breathtaking.
And we were all like, okay, guys, Keanu's in it, but he'll only been in it for like 5 minutes. And it turned out he was a Cortana-esque sidekick. He'd be with us the entire game. We were all just like,
We're talking about space magic.
the hype was so huge at this point. I personally experienced it. It was the first time since Halo 3 came out that it was literally nothing I wanted to do more than play Cyberpunk. I was ready. We were all ready. We got our gamer fuel, we got our pizza rolls, we got our snacks, we bought our next-gen consoles and PCs, and we were all ready. Cyberpunk was coming out in October. Oh, no, wait. No, it wasn't. Another delay. And people got pissed this time. And of course, you have your traditional death threats and people acting like idiot trolls. But a lot of us realized that the game may have needed just a little bit more polish. So we called up our bosses and said, hey, remember I said I needed early October off? I can't be here December. Yeah, I need to move that vacation day. Yeah, would that be all right? I mean, it'll work out. It'll be all right? And so we took December off. December 10th, 2020. Now, a few days before the game came out, most of the big press sites got the reviews up, and they were actually really good. IGN gave this game Editor's Choice and a 9 out of 10. They were assured all of the problems and bugs would be polished out with the day one patch. Something that I'm surprised people hadn't learned by that point is complete shit. I mean, we know it now, but back then everyone believed it. So the game had great reviews. We had our next-gen consoles, we were all sick that day, we were all so excited. And then we turned on Cyberpunk 2077, and we all loved it for like 7 hours. Once you got out of that initial demo area of the game, it became very clear that Cyberpunk 2077 was not going to be this big, epic, scripted RPG that we were all promised. Instead, Cyberpunk 2077 was a complete trash can fire.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
The game was unfinished and unpolished. It was filled with bugs and glitches. Just look at this video here with just some of the glitches in this game. And it got worse. The game was struggling to run even on people with 3080s. 2080 Ti players were having to play at 1080p with DLSS on. PlayStation 4 and Xbox One users should have just not bought the game, as it wasn't even able to run on those platforms. I don't actually know how CDPR decided to actually launch it on those platforms, as they should have delayed the last-gen console version of the game indefinitely. As a matter of fact, they never should have made a last-gen console version of the game in the first place. It would have allowed them more time to focus on the next-gen and PC version of the game, which meant we might have got a more polished game, rather than spending however much of the development cycle an Xbox One and PS4 version that never, ever, ever was going to work right. Those consoles just aren't technically powerful enough to run Cyberpunk. This is what happens when corporate morality meets reality. There was no way that these games were ever going to work on those consoles, and they wasted so much time on it. And CDPR knew it. They did not allow any press members to even see the last-gen console version of the game before it came out. Hell, ironically enough, they keep talking about a next-gen version of Cyberpunk. You need a PS5 or Xbox Series X to actually play this game. That is the minimum. So both of the next-gen consoles could run the game at 30 frames per second, but the thing is, the next-gen consoles were brand new. They had launched that in November, and the majority of people had not got their hands on them. So most people who had taken days off work and bought enough snacks to kill an adult elephant in excitement for this game's launch, were just sitting around with candy and playing a game that was running at 15 frames a second. It was unplayable, and unlike playing on a PC where you can try to make changes, console settings are set, so you're stuck with the absolute train wreck that is Cyberpunk. Now, of course, years ago we were more accepting of this. The original Morrowind ran very poorly on the original Xbox, but people were more accepting of this back then. Maybe it's just because I was a child, but I never thought CRT TVs had the same juddery appearance with lower frame rates that modern flat panel TVs do. So the chaos and insanity had come. Cyberpunk 2077 became one of the most hated games in the community almost overnight. People were furious. Last-gen console players demanded a refund, and CDPR would refuse the refund, saying that the store policy of Xbox and PlayStation did not allow refunds. However, that would very quickly change, as CDPR would start offering refunds to most last-gen console players. Sony would actually pull Cyberpunk 2077 off the PS4 store completely and apologize to PlayStation users for the mess that it was. And Microsoft just stuck their fingers in their ears and said, la, 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 la. Microsoft was kind of stuck because they had that whole advertising partnership with CDPR, and they couldn't really step on their feet for that reason. But either way, the game had turned into one of the largest and most unhuman disasters in the history of the game industry, film industry, or entertainment industry. CDPR did come out and apologize.
And to all those affected, I want to say, we are deeply sorry. We're sorry. We're sorry.
Take personal responsibility and claim that they would spend time working on the game to try to get it up to the original promises. And let's be completely honest, the original promises of this game were absolutely ridiculous. They essentially promised that you could live a second life in the world of Night City. They promised that you'd have quests as intricate and entertaining as The Witcher or Skyrim, but hundreds spread throughout this whole city. They promised you could interact with every NPC, go into every house, talk to everyone, and they would have opinions. They promised bunches of weapons, guns, armor, and loot. They promised hundreds and hundreds of hours of gameplay. They promised incredible top-end story. They promised Keanu fucking Reeves. And unfortunately, a lot of these promises can never be realized without restarting Cyberpunk. What it is what it is. However, underneath all this hatred, feeling of betrayal, anger, frustration, and shit performance in Glitch City, there actually was a pretty decent story in Cyberpunk 2077. The game was also fun to play, but only for people who were using top-end PCs. Honestly, this game probably should have been like Crysis, where it was exclusive to PC for a little while, until the next-gen consoles came out. They should have finished the PC version and then focused on the PlayStation and Xbox Series version, because then they would have had a good game on PC and a good game on console. This game needed so much more work than it was given, but what was actually written for the game is excellent. The Keanu Reeves segments of the game...
You know you don't gotta speak out loud to talk to me. And I've processed some shit. Changed my mind. Don't want you dead anymore.
Are incredible and worth playing the game just to experience. It was actually one of the things I loved the most about Cyberpunk. As I started playing it again, so I could talk about how the game is now in this video, I found myself enjoying the interaction with Johnny Silverhand even more. So, following the apology, all that really remained was to fix the game. Now, the game sales have been going up on Steam lately, and one of my subscribers was telling me that it had fixed a lot of problems with Cyberpunk 2077, so the damn nerd thought I would dust it off, and it inspired this video. So, for all of those of you who just clicked on this video to find out how Cyberpunk is now, welcome back. Hit that sub button. When you go to play Cyberpunk now, you do have to set your expectations realistically. If you're going into this game expecting the genre-defining, world-changing, incredible second life that you were in 2020, then you will still be disappointed. Realistically, that's never going to happen because it would require changing core principles of the game. But the thing is, underneath all those glitches and anger originally, there was a pretty good game. And what CDPR has managed to do is put a whole new coat of polish on Cyberpunk 2077. First, the bad. Well, Cyberpunk's performance is still pretty shit, and I am still running a system with a 3080, and it can run nearly every game perfectly. Most games run well over 60 FPS at 4K. Most of them run closer to 120 FPS at 4K. So it is still disappointing that it requires DLSS on ultra performance to actually hit 60 at Cyberpunk. But the game does look really good. Unfortunately, DLSS on ultra performance for all you PC users is still broken. It adds a ton of aliasing to the game. I found it was best still to set the game to 1440p and put DLSS on quality, rather than set it to 4K and put it on ultra performance, as the AI software is struggling to upscale from 720p to 4K, which is an 8-time upscale. It's too much. And unfortunately, the police interactions are still broken and repetitive. Unfortunately, they still haven't been able to program the cops to chase you like in Grand Theft Auto. Instead, what you get is the cops don't seem to do anything now, unless you actually walk near them. They don't teleport behind you anymore, which is an improvement. But if you were hoping to play this game and it be like first-person GTA where you run around and pretend to be a psychopath and then eventually get murdered by police, that experience is still not here. The armor I found so far in the game is still just terrible. You still have to look like some kind of perverted sex slave when you run around the game to actually have the best armor rating. So, now the good. The game is far more stable. When it first came out, even setting it for 1440 in performance created these wild frame rate inconsistency. The game would go up to 80 frames a second and then drop down to 40. And it could have been from something as simple as taking 10 steps. This kind of performance is jarring and makes the game feel unfun to play. However, now the game stays at a more reasonable frame rate. It stays between 69 and 55. This means you don't get those wild frame jumps, and it doesn't feel awkward to play. Plus, G-Sync works well with the game now, so it doesn't feel rough when you play it. I don't know if it's an improvement, but we're talking about good, and I still find the combat very fun in Cyberpunk 2077. It feels like it's been polished up to me a bit. The hit detection feels better. It feels easier and more responsive to hit enemies. Although on the downside to the combat, I would still highly suggest using a controller if you're on PC. The next big thing is a cleanup of glitches. So I played this game for about 10 hours so far in my revisit of it, and I only experienced one major glitch. I was backing my car up and I hit an invisible wall and then bounced into the air. But there was only one single glitch in a 10-hour playthrough, when originally you couldn't go 5 minutes in this game without seeing some kind of hilarious glitch. However, the polishing of this game and removing of glitches allows the game's already good story to shine through. Because this game's glitches are mostly ironed out now, the story of Cyberpunk 2077, which was always good, can now really be given the room it deserves to breathe. On the downside, the side quests still don't really feel like intricate RPG side quests. They feel more like open world side activities. And the game does have a lot of like open world filler in it still. But that doesn't mean the polish isn't greatly appreciated. So, is Cyberpunk 2077 really worth revisiting? Well, I'm going to say yes. Cyberpunk 2077 is worth revisiting on PC on next-gen consoles. The game is much more polished now than it was when it originally came out. They've cleaned up so many of the glitches and so many of the issues the game's true light can shine through. It is still flawed in many areas, but most of those areas are unfixable and can never be fixed, regardless of completely relaunching the game. And if you don't mind open world quest design, you probably won't mind the quests in the game anyway, because they're actually pretty decent. So, Cyberpunk 2077 is a worthwhile experience now, finally, after all this time. And there's really no video games or movies coming out right now, so I can think of no good reason not to boot Cyberpunk 2077 back up and give it another shot. If I was to review this game back when it had come out, I would have given it a 6 of a 7 range, because of the fact that its problems made the game hard to finish. And I do think it's worth revisiting. I'd give Cyberpunk an 8.5, and I would highly recommend giving it another look if you were one of the people who were really excited about the game. If you're one of the people who really enjoyed the game back when it came out but stopped playing it, I believe it is a good time to jump back in, or at least it was for me. And it's nice to see that CDPR is still supporting Cyberpunk. even though it's a secondary team at CDPR because the main one is working on The Witcher 4. Anyway, so this one turned out to be kind of long, guys. I appreciate you guys watching it. I appreciate you guys making it through the video. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share this video, share Just a Damn Nerd with your friends and family, and I hope that you guys will come back next time. Thanks for watching, and this is the Damn Nerd signing out.